If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Law by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we shall review the companion guide for Vampire the Masquerade 20th Anniversary Edition. I shall present my thoughts and opinions on its presentation and mechanics to help you better decide whether this is the sourcebook for you. Last week's book review was a little bit on the negative side. I would apologise about that, but that would imply I withdraw my comments, which I have no intention of doing. I do, however, feel a little bad about the change in tone. I'm usually far more positive in my reviews, but then again, not a lot of Vampire the Masquerade books leave me as confused as the V5 companion guide did, which really didn't feel like it offered a lot of information I couldn't work out of myself. Similar remarks could be said with the V20 companion guide, which is the focus of this week's review. I say could because despite its small size, this book appears to offer a lot more information than its V5 offspring, judging solely on the blurb of the book. But does it deliver on these promises, or does it fall a little flat? Before I answer that question, here are the rules as to how I run my book reviews. I will explore snippets of the lore, mechanics and rules found within the tome. I will look as to how they are presented and easily they are conveyed to new and old players alike. As this is a review written and presented by me, all thoughts and opinions are my own, so if you disagree with something I have said, that is totally fine. It does not mean that you are right and I am wrong and vice versa. A good place to start with anything is at the beginning, which has a start with the physical book itself, which currently sits neatly upon my lap. It is a letter-sized hardback book with the infamous green marble pattern like practically every Vampire the Masquerade core book before it and everything else in the V20 line. The art found within the book ranges in the beautiful varying styles that have their own story to tell and present the diverse levels of horror that fans young and old love, whether it is a Tim Bradstreet original, a piece from one of the revised Clan novels, or a newer piece that fits very nicely with the Onyx Path publishing style. There is very little to fault in terms of the artistic direction, if anything at all. I would, however, like to mention how much I'm in awe of the front cover, which definitely has a very different mood when compared to practically every piece of art I have seen up until this point. It clearly takes inspiration from J-horror designs such as Duron and Ringo, and possibly the ghosts found in the Fatal Frame video game series, known as Project Zero in some regions, but that is just wishful thinking on my part. I have seen a few discussions online that have tried to unravel what is going on here, but I have interpreted these two figures as the kindred and their beast wrapped up in a violent embrace, a frightening relationship that every K-Knight is forced to endure, and I love this depiction, assuming that is indeed what this illustration is supposed to represent. There is a strange sexual tension to be found in this picture, and a quick browse on the artist's ArtStation page shows a risque mastery at capturing such saucy passion. I'm intrigued to see what Steve Strauberg would do with V5, but I'll leave my fleeting flights of fancy there. Moving from one different thing to another, we enter the book proper with the introduction, omitting any form of short story, just like the V5 companion guide did. The introduction here is also similar to that of the V5 one, telling the reader what to expect, but with the added verbiage that is a brief history lesson on how these books are developed, how they were previously, and that this entire book was designed not to feel like a companion guide, but a book resulting from fan feedback in the response to some of the systems being too mechanic-based. A fan-led director's cut, so to speak. It is also addressed in the first person, with Justin Achille, one of the two authors of this supplement guide, the other being Eddie Webb, delivering the introduction, which is another odd choice of VTM introductions. Chapter 1 is all about kindred titles, including the ways to come up with your own, clan-specific ones, and the titles found across the different sects. This includes the main three, the Camarilla, the Anarch and Sabbat, as well as the two that no one likes, the Tamahera and Inconnu. You may be sitting here thinking that you know all the titles. You listened to my episodes on each of these sects, and you read the books where each title is explained in great detail in V20. Well, most of them anyway. Dux Bellorum isn't mentioned, and neither is Warlord or Monitor. I'm not going to tell you who and what these titles belong to further explain my point. But on the off chance you do know these titles like the back of the hands of your most recent character, there's probably the temptation to rush past this until you read something you don't know. Don't do this, as you are bound to learn something new with a brand new perspective. For example, did you know that the positive titles can be used as negative punishments? That is something that is mentioned in this chapter. A thin blood-loving neonate may be assigned the title of Scourge just to keep them in line, or someone might be made a Keep of Elysium with the hope of their sire and prince to fail and become a laughingstock. It is also possible for someone to be such a disgrace or monumental fuck-up in their clan that they are demoted to caitiff, disowned by their clan. On that note, the chapter ends with a 2-page spread of the V20 caitiff, which was somewhat absent from the V20 core book. It was an absence that I didn't think was missed all that much, as there was no real revelation in terms of caitiff lore, and there is nothing in these pages that didn't blow my mind upon reading it, including the edgy yet goofy artwork. Having just said to you, don't skip sections on seemingly familiar subjects, you could very easily miss this one if you so desire and not miss anything. The second chapter on the companion guide dissects the Kindred custom of Prestation that is immediately assigned to the Camarilla. This was something that I assumed to be the case, until learning that all the sects have different takes on this, including the True Black Hand, Inconnu, and the independent clans which are the Giovanni, Setites, and Ravno in V20. A lot of engaging detail is presented on what exactly Prestation is and the politics that revolve around it and the sects, which you don't really see a lot of, which is a shame. In addition to this, boons are also expanded upon, what they are, the different types, and the dangers of what happens if you were to cheat the system. As you can probably suspect, you are branded as someone who is unreliable and dishonest, neither a thing that you want to be known as, especially with eternally damned creatures of the night. This section also discusses how elders can abuse the boon system to maintain the power above everyone else. You can too, if you are foolish enough. A chapter on Kindred technology follows, which may seem incredibly redundant to the modern player, but such a mindset lacks context. As much as you'll see fans praise on the rooftops that V20 is the best version of VTM, what is often forgotten that it was never intended to be its own edition. It was meant as a celebratory item of sorts, a culmination of the last 20 years of Vampire the Masquerade, hence the title. It was the essential material, and a few extras from the revised edition book crammed into one book to stop players, and especially STs, breaking their backs, carrying a billion books around just to find all the information for that one prick who wanted to play the last true Brujah. Yes, future sourcebooks written and released by Onyx Path would turn V20 into its own edition, but all V20 was meant to do at the beginning was bring the best of revised editions material together in one big book. The revised edition, or the third edition of Vampire the Masquerade, was published on the 12th of August 1998, 23 years at the time of recording, and the technology that has developed in that time and how integral it has become to our lives is frightening. This chapter only adds to that, adding many different topics of discussion that question what domain actually means in an age where someone in the UK could hack someone in Botswana, for example. Other elements such as clever usage of phone apps, weapons of mass destruction, and even gambling are highlighted as ways for Kindred of all ages to manipulate technology. I say all ages, for the book highlights all ages. It does not bow to the stereotype that older vampires are incapable of using technology, but it does state how elders may use technology and how the relationship held over them would differ massively from the freshly dead fledglings. It is a small detail with a huge narrative that I love. The final chapter of the book is a list of canonical places that have appeared in the game's metaplot over the last 20 years, as of the publishing of V20, such as the Cathedral of Flesh, K-Melkli, and the Prime Chantry in Vienna. Each place has a short description of what it is, where it is located if its location is known, in addition to a few plot hook ideas for what is going on in the modern V20 Knights. As the lover of the lore behind VTM, I am rather fond of this chapter, and the opportunities it could bring for STs and players alike for their games. However, I do have to admit that this is probably the second weakest chapter in the book, with the appendix that follows it being the weakest. This only details some cut material from V20. As interesting as it is to see Beyond the Veil, I am unsure whether this was a needed thing to include in a companion guide aimed to enhance stories. I have omitted one thing about the book, which is the size of the book itself. You may have gathered by this point that it is a very small book, 79 pages, making it 15 pages longer than the V5 companion guide. Holding the V20 companion guide in my hand is a very weird sensation, as it often feels like there is more hardback than paper. Many would see the girth of the book, or the lack of thereof, as a huge flaw of the material. Yes, I would always love to see more Vampire the Masquerade material, but one should judge a book not by its size, but the content from within. What is provided in this companion guide is very useful, serving its title as a companion to the main book very nicely, expanding upon well-established game terms and mechanics, in addition to starting the small fire of ideas that can quickly cause an inferno in the right hands. Regardless to what version of Vampire the Masquerade you play, I highly recommend you grab this book. It will enhance your stories and settings tenfold. And for those of you who are new to the Lore by Night brand and the reviews I occasionally do, I do not do out of 10 scores because they are subjectively pointless. One man's 10 out of 10 is another man's 3 out of 5 stars, which is another's minus 42 out of 100. So I shall rate this book Vital Hack out of 10, as that is just as helpful as the proper out of 10 score. To be kept updated, follow the Lore by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.